This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. What I'm looking at today is Jim Mickle's The Shadow of the Moon, which is on Netflix. And I have to admit that I initially did not watch this movie because you can't tell what it actually is about, at least not from the little blurb they give, as well as the title. It's just a little confusing. I thought it was more in the range of a drama about a serial killer. And in a sense it is. But it's actually pretty clever because that's not all it's about. It is about a serial killer. That much is true. But the way it plays with the conceit is really interesting. You might remember in one of my reaction videos I was talking about Terminator Dark Fate and how if they wanted to save the franchise, it's a little late at this point, the horse has pretty much left the barn, but if they wanted to save this franchise, they would have rebooted it in such a way as keeping the essential concept, but changing it in ways that make it appear new. Even if it's not, make it appear new. So I'll just put this out there right now. I want to give out as few spoilers about this movie as possible. But The Shadow of the Moon is essentially the Terminator story, which is not exactly original, though keep in mind that Jim Cameron didn't come up with that concept. If I'm not mistaken, Harlan Ellison actually came up with that idea and sued James Cameron for it. So the Terminator concept, as I said, is not original, and it's used in The Shadow of the Moon. It's used pretty well, in fact. And I would argue some variation on this theme is what we should have saw with Terminator Dark Fate. It changes it up in a really interesting way. It's a well-acted movie. It looks good. It keeps you guessing. You don't quite know why things are happening. All you know is that people are dying in a really odd way, but you don't know necessarily the hows or the whys. And as the movie proceeds, it gives you that information. It's well done, as I said, though there's one problem. It's a minor problem, but a problem nonetheless. It's that the movie covers different time periods. So there'll be a card for, let's say, 1999, another for 2018, and so on and so forth. Now, the thing about that is the movie showed the actors physically change from one time period to the next. And there's some really bad toupees. Like Bokeem Woodbine, who plays a cop, has a toupee early on, and it just looks so weird and out of place. And the other actor he's working with has like a prosthetic stomach to give him a paunch. It's just really noticeable and not really necessary to do. If these characters originally didn't have hair and a paunch, and you're doing this to show a change in time, it just looks really funky and odd. And the toupee that Bokeem Woodbine wears is, again, atrocious. It screams toupee. And that's not something I'm used to seeing on black men. White actors, it's not uncommon. Black ones, not so much. So it's just not a good look. But that's a relatively minor detail. What's more important is that the story is interesting, but very familiar. Again, it plays like Terminator. I should say it does things you wouldn't see a recent incarnation of Terminator do, making it really interesting. It becomes vaguely Seven-esque, and I'm pretty sure you can't do that. Well, I should say, I'm pretty sure the people who currently manage the Terminator franchise would not do this. But it would be interesting to see. It would change the whole dynamic of the film and make it something more, something genuinely different feeling while keeping the same essential concept. And that would have, I think, been a benefit to that movie. Oh, by the way, I should mention that these crimes, these serial killings happen every 9 years. and there's some explanation about the moon and tides and gravitational fields. It sounds like scientific gobbledygook, to be totally honest with you. But it's good to see they make the attempt. I mean, if they didn't explain it, I certainly would have asked why. They did explain it, it doesn't make any sense regardless, but it's interesting. The whole movie is in fact really interesting, and I get a feeling that not a lot of people are going to watch In the Shadow of the Moon. If only because, as I said earlier, Netflix doesn't necessarily tell you very well what this movie is. And that's a pity because I like Netflix a lot, but they generate so much volume, stuff vanishes. And I could see this movie vanishing really quickly. Only because, not because it isn't good, it is quite good, but because there's just so much stuff. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace.